Hey guys, my name is Audrey Leffman and I'm going to be discussing bullying in schools. So the American Psychological Association defines bullying as an aggressive behavior that is intended to cause distress or harm, involves an imbalance of power or strength between the aggressor and the victim, and occurs repeatedly over time. It can take many forms, including physical, verbal, relational, and cyber. Reports have found that more than 1 out of every 5 students report being bullied. There are certain subgroups of students who are more likely to be affected by this, such as members of the LGBT community, as well as students with disabilities. 46 states have bullying laws, and 45 of those laws direct school districts to adopt bullying policies. However, 3 of the 46 states prohibit bullying without defining the behavior that is prohibited. As times are developing, many states have also expanded their policies towards cyberbullying. Since 1999, state legislatures have been incredibly active with bullying in schools. More than 120 bills were enacted by states from the period of 1990 to 2010 to amend education or criminal justice statutes that address bullying. And by 2015, every state had passed a law that directs schools, districts, or individual schools to develop policies that address bullying. This includes a wide variety of forms, but some of the most common provisions include investigation and reporting of bullying, disciplinary actions for students involved in bullying, as well as staff training and prevention efforts. Bullying occurs for a multitude of reasons. There are sort of 3 perspectives on it. This includes the individual perspective, the socio-ecological perspective, and the systematic perspective. It ultimately and typically stems from a power relationship. The abuser feels that they need to obtain power for whatever reason. Perhaps there's another area in their life where they feel helpless, or perhaps they want to exceed their social status within the school, or they simply don't like the victim. Whatever it may be, there is often a diverse and sort of complicated set of psychology behind the bullying that is worth considering when addressing the abuser. Effects can take place in short-term and to long-term extents in both the victim and the abuser. For the victim, short-term can include poor school performance, low self-esteem, social isolation, and psychosomatic symptoms. The abuser can also experience poor school performance, as well as difficulty maintaining relationships, an increased risk of substance abuse, and an increased truancy risk. Long-term effects for the victim include struggling with depression, anxiety, and PTSD, which can manifest itself in self-destructive behavior, ultimately leading to suicidal thoughts, plans, and attempts. They can also cause difficulty for the individual to establish relationships and really just thrive in their life. Long-term effects on the abuser include risk of spousal or child abuse, risk of antisocial behavior, substance abuse, and they're less likely to be educated or employed. So what should teachers do? We are mandated reporters. We are advocates for the children. We cannot stand by indifferent to this issue. Dorothy Espelage, a PhD holder, she's a psychology professor at the University of Florida, said this: "We can reduce multiple forms of aggression if we implant social-emotional learning programs to equip kids with skills to problem solve, cope with the stressors of life, and have empathy." So ultimately, the key is prevention. Teachers can work towards prevention by spreading awareness about bullying in their classrooms. Developing strong relationships with students is also key, as many students lack a support system that they feel is obviously necessary to them. So if teachers can be visible and accessible throughout the day for students, that is a huge factor in instances of students feeling isolated or rejected, which manifests itself in these bullying situations. Teachers should also create a comfortable classroom that discourages cliques or segregation among students, and ultimately work towards creating a school-wide community that endorses transparency and kindness and unity. Teachers should also work to teach their students how to be effective bystanders, which means being aware of the instances of bullying going around them, being sensitive to indicators of victims and abusers, and being confident in reporting those events to administration or teacher or an adult. So signs of victims and abusers. Victims also often come off as cautious, sensitive, shy, withdrawn. They often relate better to adults than peers and do not typically have a strong friend group or even a solid single good friend. Abusers, on the other hand, often have a strong need to dominate. They are impulsive and easily angered, show little empathy, they are defiant, and typically physically stronger than their counterparts. So when bullying does occur after you've taken all your preventative measures, if it still does happen, it is critical that you respond to the situation as quickly as possible. Pull aside the victim privately and just talk with them. Be sure to really empathize and listen to their situation and make an active plan to resolve the issue. You want to speak with the bully separately and encourage them to own up to their behavior. Don't let them blame the victim or any other circumstance, even though it can derive from unfortunate circumstances in the abuser's life. They still need to own up to the fact that they are ultimately causing harm towards another student. You'll want to give them ideas on how to act differently in the future. You want to develop appropriate interventions such as counseling for both parties. This can be really beneficial, as well as keep an eye on the situation and continue to check on in both the victims' and abusers' lives. Continue to be an active and supportive presence in their lives, someone that they can talk to if they are still struggling with the aftermath of this issue, or still being bullied, or still feeling the urge to bully. I thought it would be interesting to include some students' perspectives. Students reported that the most helpful things teachers can do are to listen to the student, check in with them afterwards to see if the bullying stopped, and to give the student advice. They reported that the most harmful things teachers can do are to tell the students to resolve the problem themselves, tell the students that bullying won't happen if they acted differently, ignore what was going on, or tell the student to stop tattling. Students who have been bullied reported that the self-actions that had some of the most negative impacts are often used by youth and often recommended to youth, such as telling the person to stop or how they feel, walking away, or pretending it doesn't bother them. So I thought that would be something really critical to take into consideration, as well as just a reminder to be transparent and exercise open communication with all of your students. There is my works cited. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I hope you learned something super valuable.